Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, December 31st, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the Sunbelt region of the United States. I made a video 2 days ago talking about this topic, but unfortunately my computer decided to just really mess up. It stopped recording midway, but kept the audio going. So what happened was that it was frozen in time about 2 minutes into the video. So I decided that I'd go ahead and offer you guys a revamped video. Hopefully this one doesn't end up messing up. I'm going to make sure it doesn't, so if it actually is messed up, you probably won't be watching this video, so let's hope everything goes to plan. But looking at where we are on our national level for 2024, the Sunbelt region is a region across the United States in the southernmost hemisphere, most commonly regarded and discussed in these red regions of the country, ranging from California all the way over to North Carolina. Now, I will say that there is a bit of ambiguity when it comes down to what actually is Sunbelt. Now, this is what Wikipedia determines it to be as such, but some states identify as being part of the Sunbelt, and some other portions of the state determine themselves to be in that region as well. And there's a lot of discussion, I think, as to what actually should or should not be really thrown into this general region. For example, also another region of the country that we commonly refer to is the Rust Belt, most often talked about in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, but it includes states such as Ohio, parts of West Virginia, parts even of New York, Indiana, Illinois, which really don't get much traction or discussion. In that such too, you also see Minnesota grouped in often, even though it's not officially a part of the Rust Belt region. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation about what is Rust Belt or not, but generally speaking, we're working with these states. So any state that really is touched on this red region, I would say I would determine to be Sunbelt, just for the sake of maintaining what we can pretty much expect to see in that region. But you generally get that it is the most southern portion of the United States. States such as Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Georgia, Florida, parts of North Carolina, South Carolina included. So generally the southern region, right? So you're talking about these states, all the states that are touched by the Sun Belt. We're going to go ahead and characterize, but I will say that it isn't a perfect science. Keep that in mind as well. But let's just go ahead and characterize them right now. I don't believe I'm missing any states from what I've just characterized. Hopefully not. It looks like I am all good. But these are the states that we are really going to be talking about. 256 electoral votes that will be important to Democrats and their victories in years well beyond 2024, but especially in 2024. Coming off of a presidential election cycle where President Joe Biden won in Georgia and Arizona for the first time since 1992 for Georgia, 1996 for Arizona, it has been a long time coming for Democrats to reclaim this territory in a region of the United States that has been largely viewed as unwinnable for the Democratic Party. You know, from what was a red sea has now turned into splotches of blue, starting to form equal land in this Sunbelt region. California was always there, but Democrats in general sense won New Mexico, sometimes Colorado, sometimes Nevada, but to add in Georgia and Arizona into the mix, especially after the 2022 midterm cycle where Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada and Colorado were pretty solid for the Democratic Party, it has become increasingly clear that the Democratic Party's grip on this Sun Belt region has begun to increase. Now, the discussion of this really goes back and dates back to the 2012 presidential election when Mitt Romney ran against Barack Obama. Now, this was a race that was extremely close leading up to Election Day. There were many predictions about which party was going to win, and ultimately, Obama did come ahead. But his margin of victory in terms of overall raw votes was less than Joe Biden and less in terms of percentage, and practically on par with Hillary Clinton's raw vote advantage over Donald Trump. The main difference was where Obama was getting these votes from. Obama didn't do so well in the Sunbelt region. I think he did well in Florida by being able to win it, but even then it was by 0.9%. The state of North Carolina turned against him. South Carolina, Georgia, the rest of the Sunbelt was pretty solid for the GOP. That includes larger states such as Texas, where Democrats have now seen potentially a revitalized opportunity at victory. Mitt Romney won here by 16 points in 2012. Over in the state of Georgia, Mitt Romney won by 8 points across the state. Arizona, a state that Mitt Romney won by 10 points against Barack Obama. Margins that are now incomprehensible for the GOP in these three states alone. But it doesn't just end there. The state of New Mexico, even in Mitt Romney's loss, was only a loss for the GOP by about 9.9%. In Colorado, Barack Obama won by about 5. And in Nevada, it was a pretty substantial margin, but it was about 7 points, which is still larger than what Democrats get today. But beyond that, what you're finding is a solidification across many of these other states. And what I will say is that in the last election cycle, if we were just to characterize the Sunbelt states based off of how they would have voted, we can see them characterized on the map. The GOP ultimately is going to have this upper hand because they have some larger states. They have Florida, they have Texas. But Democrats winning these states alone, in conjunction with all the other states that they won, was the reason for them winning the presidency. But at what point in time is the question that we add in the rest of the United States? At what point in time does the Sunbelt become the region of the country where Republicans are losing and Democrats are riding it to victory? What I mean by that is, let's say, for instance, Democrats are losing in the Rust Belt region. Does that mean they make it up in the Sunbelt region? Well, if they are to win, the answer is absolutely yes. You see, with the GOP's growth in probability at winning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, it has to do with the fact that populations here are decreasing. The white population is increasing, and on the standard basis, white Americans vote for the Republican Party at the highest level of any racial group in this nation. So with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as states the GOP is going to heavily target in the next few election cycles, if that goes and this map maintains itself, the GOP does win re-election. The GOP, or at least, does win whichever presidential race decides to come their way. But the problem is that with this decrease in population, these voters are going elsewhere. These citizens are moving elsewhere, and a lot of them are going to the Sunbelt. You're seeing an increase in population in Arizona, an increase in population in Georgia, an increase in population in North Carolina. And the interesting thing is that these states are actually, generally at least, trending towards the Democrats or maintaining themselves as extremely competitive and very much winnable states for the Democrats. Because let's take a state, for example, maybe the state of North Carolina. You give it to the Democrats, forget Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, including Ohio, Iowa, Florida, Texas, Maine's 2nd Congressional District. These battleground states and districts, and you take North Carolina, flip it over to the Democrats, they win the election. And the reason why that wouldn't be too hard to believe is because if you take North Carolina out of consideration, you give Donald Trump all of his states back besides the ones that the Republicans lost in 2022, with the exception of Pennsylvania, because let's just say, if you give Pennsylvania to the Democrats, that election's over. Let's just say you apply 2016 and you maintain the states where Democrats in an R+4 year were able to maintain their incumbents in Georgia by 2 points, Arizona by 5, you would find the map to be 259 for the Democrats and 263 for the Republicans. In fact, I'll do, the Republicans one better and give them Nebraska's 2nd district. But even that, it only brings them to 264. What are they relying on? The state of North Carolina, that one state that would determine the balance of power or determine the election winner. History tells us the GOP is going to win it, but if Democrats are able to win it, which, again, depending on population growth, depending on a changing electorate, the Georgia of today is not the Georgia of 10 years ago. You can see this in census data, which I think perfectly captures it, and we'll talk about this shift in vote based off of the change in population. We can visualize it in just a moment. But North Carolina being here as a state that could determine the presidential election sure is necessarily good news for the GOP, but it means Democrats have a pathway to victory well without Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, if they lose Minnesota, it's another question, but they haven't lost Minnesota since 1972, and I don't think 2024 or 2028, quite frankly, will be the year to do that. And this is also counting on the fact that Republicans win in practically every other swing state beyond Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. You're talking about states that the Republican Party has seen a decreased and weakened grip in for 2024, states such as New Hampshire, which just rejected their Republican nominee by 10 points in a red wave year, or what was meant to be a red wave year, at least in terms of the overall popular vote, it was. And you know what happened? Democrats did quite well. So in a way, on the national vote, sure, red wave, but in terms of the results, not so much, right? So we got to keep that in mind as well. But New Hampshire just rejected the GOP by 10 points. Nevada pushed back against its former attorney general. Colorado blew the Republicans out of the water, lost by 15 points in both the governor and Senate race. That was larger than Joe Biden's margin to victory for candidates that probably should not have been able to outperform Joe Biden in an election where so many voters in Colorado really did not like President Trump. The Republicans decided to nominate someone who wasn't similar to President Trump really in any regard. They had a pro-choice Republican on the ballot. He lost by 15 points. So That's something to keep in mind as well. It was not a sleeper race. It was not close. It was not competitive. And for a while, we thought that it was going to be, largely because we were feeding into this narrative that it was going to be a very good year for the GOP. That did not end up happening. And Colorado reaffirms itself in the belief that it is a blue state. But the point is, the Democrats absolutely have a pathway to victory without the Rust Belt, and it relies on this Sunbelt region. And it honestly isn't too bad of a strategy. Chances are Democrats are winning Arizona in 2024. If Katie Hobbs was able to do so well here, I have no doubt that Joe Biden would be able to as well. Same thing in the state of Georgia. I think these states are becoming increasingly more Democratic. You can see the shift over time quite clearly. And again, I said I would help us visualize it. So what I'm going to do is show you past election versus past election. I want to compare 2012 versus 2016. This is what I did in my last video. Unfortunately, the map did not populate. But what we find here is that even in a year, 2016, a Trump victory, 2012, an Obama victory, a Republican versus Democratic victory, the Democrats didn't do so well in many states. They saw decreases in margins across most of them. Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. These are states that Obama won in 2012 that Hillary Clinton lost. Quite handedly, if you ask me. But then you see the states of Arizona, Texas, Georgia, 3 states that are going to be crucial to Democrats winning in future elections. What happens? Even with Hillary Clinton's lackluster performance, and I say that not as a bash on Hillary Clinton, but as just a clear, a determining quality of that election cycle, Georgia became 2.7% more Democratic. Arizona became 5.5% more Democratic, and Texas became 6.8% better for the Democratic Party. 3 points, 6 points, 7 points. That trend continues. 2016 versus 2020. Arizona becomes 4 points more Democratic, it flips. Texas becomes 3 points more Democratic, it doesn't flip. Georgia becomes 5 points more Democratic, and it flips. And considering that we are working with margins where Democrats are in a very similar position in Georgia and Arizona as they will be for Texas, as Texas was in 2020 going into 2024. If Texas was to exhibit a shift similar to what it exhibited between 2012 and 2016, Texas flips the next election cycle. Meaning that if Joe Biden or whichever Democrat is propped up in 2024 can do as well in terms of improving the margin as Hillary Clinton did, then Texas goes to the Democrats. And if Texas is to go, and I know the GOP rejects this, like the devil itself rejects it, because they know what it means. It means if Texas goes, they lose everything, quite literally everything. If they lose control of the state legislature, if they lose control of Congress through the state, if they lose control of the governorship, Republicans have nowhere else to gerrymander large states beyond Florida. And even then, it wasn't enough to solidify a 2022 House victory that was larger than what the Democrats had, which was the narrowest of the 21st century. So to see Texas as the state that is achievable for Democrats, forget literally everything else. Minnesota could go. New Hampshire could go. You could even see large states such as New York go to the GOP, and you know what happens? Texas counteracts that. But we know that New York isn't going red. Generally speaking, Minnesota isn't going red either. But as I was saying, because we are seeing similar trends in Georgia, Arizona, and we have pathways to victories without Texas to look at, to analyze for the Democratic Party. Republicans do too. We have things to look at for the GOP. But Texas in itself, if Texas was to go to the Republican Party, to the Democratic Party, it would no longer be a race winnable for the GOP on the national level. If Texas goes, there is no pathway forward for the GOP in 2024. It probably won't go to the Democrats. Chances are it's going to go to the GOP because that's what it's been doing. But we do expect it to narrow up. And it also feeds into this idea that the future pathways of victory for the Democratic Party will rely on this region. And I wholeheartedly believe it. Now, some people say Florida is a lost cause. I was looking at the 2022 election results mostly to look at Marco Rubio's margin to victory over Val Demings. And in a way, I think Florida is gone for Democrats in 2024. But I don't think it's this gone state. I think that so many of us decide to build these impressions off of states off of just a singular election cycle. Keep in mind that this wasn't a consistent trend. Sure, Republicans have done well, but look at their margins, right? 2014, they win by less than a point. 2016, Trump wins by a point. 2018, both top-tier Republicans win by less than a point. 2020, Donald Trump wins by 3 points. Sure, Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio had an extremely impressive victory, but I wouldn't count out Florida just yet. I will say, though, I don't think it's a state worth fighting for to the extent that it was in the past, and I think that there are more winnable states. But let's say we're talking about an election cycle 8 years down the time where Florida becomes back as this competitive state, as a winnable state for Democrats, then sure, it's worth investing in to a heavy extent, and also could give Democrats that upper hand. Because shocks happen all the time in American politics. I don't think Florida is going to be one of them in 2024, but there certainly is an opportunity for growth there for Democrats. And I don't think it's entirely reasonable to give up a state off of just one thing alone. But I think Georgia, Arizona, Texas even are more worthwhile investments by far. But just looking at these states across the South, again, this is assuming Democrats even lose the Rust Belt region, which is a stretch considering that they've just won it 3 times in the past 3 election cycles. These states are going to be the future for Democrats, and they know it, and they should know it. They should invest, run candidates, and make sure that they're winning. They just got Arizona. They just got Georgia. They have one statewide position in North Carolina, which means it's winnable for Democrats. They have solidified New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada. So the question is, looking at these remaining states, sure, the GOP will probably pick up Texas. They'll probably pick up Florida. But that means if North Carolina goes blue, they win the race. Democrats win the race. It isn't likely, but it also means that, this map is also a very weird type of scenario. It isn't likely that Democrats will lose all 3 of these states either. But it shows a pathway to victory that no longer relies on the formerly traditional pathway for Democrats that they were hoping to use in 2020, were able to use in 2020, but will no longer be the main focus or the end-all be-all for the national Democrats as we head into the next couple of election cycles. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.